Welcome to a new episode of the Prosperity on Air podcast. I'm Paola De Vescovi, your host. I hope you are having a wonderful week. As you know, for the whole month of January, you will have 2 episodes of the Prosperity on Air podcast, since I want to accommodate the interviews with all the amazing speakers at the Women Who Dare to Desire conference taking place in London at the end of this month on the 31st of January. I'm so honored and happy to be one of these amazing speakers at the conference, and I really hope to see many of you there. You will hear stories, experiences that will inspire you to maybe create your business or maybe to simply just go after your dream. You will have the opportunity to meet many daring women, not only the speakers, but also the women in the audience. You will have the opportunity to network, to meditate together, to participate in many activities together. So if you happen to be in London, really don't miss this opportunity. So today I'm interviewing another amazing speaker at this conference, an expert in a topic that I am really fascinated about, which is neuroscience, the science that studies how the structure of the brain and of the nervous system is made of, how it functions, and so how the human brain operates. It's actually a multidisciplinary science involving many different sciences, and the results of the studies conducted really are changing the way we understand the brain, how the brain functions, and it explains how we are wired and why we are who we are and how we operate and how we behave in our life, in our relationships, in our business, with our colleagues, with our business partners, with our clients. So it's really fascinating. And we are speaking about this very interesting topic with an amazing person. As I was saying, she's one of the amazing speakers. I use this word a lot these days, but she is, and also all the other women that I'm interviewing and who are going to be speakers at the conference are really amazing. So bear with me if I'm overusing the term amazing. Okay, so I'm honored to interview Gill McKay. Gill is one of the founders and a managing director of My Brain International, and she provides tools and materials to enable professional coaches and trainers to use the exciting, evolving subject of neuroscience in their work so that they can really attain better and deeper and lasting results with their clients. She helps people become more effective by becoming aware of their thinking and how they communicate, and through understanding their neurological preferences. And you will hear about, a brain-based model of how we function, of how we behave. So these preferences really strongly influence the way they are. She so helps individuals, teams, and organizations get clarity, become more confident, effective, energized, engaged, and focused on their strengths and diversity. And you will hear in our conversation how it is really important to have a very diverse team, because if we are, all similar to each other, it is very easy to get along and collaborate. But there's no richness that is built in the team and in the work the team carries out if we are all the same. So when we are different, there, maybe it is a little more complicated to find a way to get along and incorporate all these diversities, but it's certainly more challenging. It is more interesting. It is more fascinating, and the result is certainly more creative, more fulfilling, more satisfactory. So I don't want to take too much of your time, so let's move into my interview, my conversation. I like to call them conversations rather than interviews with Gill McKay. Gill, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you.
As you know, I have already introduced you a little bit to my audience, but I would like you to say something more about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely delighted. Well, first of all, thank you for welcoming me so warmly. So my name is Gill McKay. I live in London. I'm a mother of 3, a wife, a sister, a daughter, all of those wonderful things. And in terms of my work, I am just absolutely passionate about neuroscience, which is what we're going to talk about today. In fact, I'd broaden that in terms of my work and my life. I really think that taking a peek inside our brains for everybody is useful and liberating.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So to begin with, let us, let's say something about neurosciences. So what neurosciences do? What is their main focus?
So I think the main focus in business or in people's personal lives today is the fact that you can now actually apply it. We're at a really, really exciting time in the world of neuroscience because let's say 20 years ago when I first started getting into it, all of the research was around autopsies, so cutting up dead people or looking at extreme patients, epileptic patients. It was all very useful, but it was predominantly used in a clinical setting. What's happened now, I call it since the wonder of technology, the fMRI scanning and all of that stuff. What sort of has happened now is it's enabled all of that research to become more accessible to people anybody interested really in the development arena. So people in the training, in the coaching arena use it to help people to build self-awareness. So I think that's absolutely the crux and the usefulness and the main application of neuroscience. By taking a little look inside their brains, they can understand why they are the way they are. It really adds scientific evidence to the world of psychology. So all of the sort of world of psychology and the theories and the thinking about human behavior can be brought to life and evidenced by neuroscience. And that's why it's particularly exciting, and we're at a pivotal time now because we're beginning to find out a little bit more about that underpinning physiology of the brain and how it relates to human behavior.
And what do you find particularly fascinating and interesting about the brain?
Oh, well, I've got some wonderful, wonderful brain facts that we can share. I think for me, in my work, using neuroscience in my work for many, many years, over 20 years, I would say, maybe 15 at a more sort of liberating level, what it gives people, because it enables people to really understand that physiological underpinning, it liberates them. It gives them permission to be the person that they really are. So when I start to have a conversation with a client, whether it's in a coaching context or in a training context or in an interview context, whatever it is, by helping them to understand the way that they are wired and how that comes out and manifests as behavior and the way they operate, the way they communicate, the way they think, that can be hugely liberating for them. So I really find that fascinating about the brain. But some top facts that I just think are applicable and really fascinating is that you may know, you may not, that what we do know is that 80% of our neurons are based, it's our brain cells, are based in the older, what we call subcortex brain structures of the brain. So it's the part of the brain that millions of years ago we needed to access and to use in order to survive in a completely different world than the world we are now. So for me, that really gives people a factual evidence base that, you know, trust your instincts, because in the old days we operated virtually purely on instinct for survival. These days we tend to really honour, there's nothing wrong with this, but maybe overly honour the rational part of the brain. Whereas I really do think that when people understand that 80% of our neurons are based in the ancient part of the brain, it can help us to perhaps trust our instincts a little bit more, maybe overtly look out for them, consciously look out for those instincts, and the emotional part of the brain, because it was the emotional part of the brain that helped us survive.
It's very interesting what you're saying, because, you know, I most of my coaching is based on getting in touch with this inner part of yourself and your intuition. And very often people that think that this is woo-woo thing, you know,
very much.
This strange, absurd, metaphysical world. But what you are saying instead is based on science. I mean, our instincts that speak to us is something that is wired in the brain. I mean,
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I think for some people in the coaching world that you and I are both involved in, just even understanding that fact, they don't almost need evidence or proof, but just even understanding the 80% of the neurons based there, it can help almost legitimize this woo-woo soft process that you and I are involved in, or the perceived woo-woo. So it provides almost like that empirical underpinning of the work they're doing, and that can really help them enter with more strength into a coaching conversation and with more motivation to be able to create change in their life.
And Gill, you spoke about the fact that, of course, we are wired in a certain way, and this wiring, I think, is form and depends upon many things, including, you know, the environment where we live, the way we grow up, etc. So if I am wired in a certain way, how easy or difficult it is to modify this wiring?
Okay, so there could be about 100 sub-questions in what you said. I knew we would do this. We both love this subject so much. I know.
We could go on and on and on for ages. Okay.
And that's great. So I think, first of all, this brings up the whole nature-nurture debate. And I don't think we'll ever get to the stage where neuroscientists are able to evidence and say that there is a causal percentage for how much is your DNA and how much is your environment. And do you know what, Paula? It doesn't matter. I think as long as we know that there is a mix of where you're brought up, the choices that you're given, the opportunities that are around you, your personality type, I'll come back to that, and how you take opportunities, how choices you make. And again, so that's your environmental piece. but also the DNA and the genetic piece as well. There are lots of twin studies, and it's fascinating to read where twins are separated and adopted into different families. Maybe one twin goes up to the Scandinavia, or one twin goes down to more of the sort of Italian and more the Mediterranean type of culture. And of course, the environment is going to have some differences, but they will also share some similarities. So they'll share some physical similarities, maybe eye color or hair color, but there will be some wirings that will also be similar too, because they've inherited some similar DNA. Now, your question, just looping back round, was around how easy it is for people to flex, amend, adapt. If you choose, and I will add a caveat to that, if you're motivated to choose to create a change in your life, the wonderful infrastructure of this 3-pound mass in your head will enable you to take some changes. So, and I'm quite clear about this choice. So you might choose, so let's take self-development. If you're on a trajectory to create great change in your life, your brain can create new and stronger neural pathways so that you're able to access those more readily. At first, when you're creating change, it feels harder to go there because those neural pathways aren't embedded. They are, if you think of a groove in the pavement, or a groove if you're in a bicycle path, you know, that track may not be embedded as yet, but the more you visit it, the more easy it will be for you to access. So that's called neuroplasticity. There's a lot written around that. What we do know is that children's brains are more plastic than adults, but neuroplasticity is available to us at all ages, and it's evidence from behavioral development, self-development, as I've just discussed, right the way through to if somebody has a horrible brain injury from a stroke or from an accident, they really are able to relearn to function by laying down new neural pathways. I'm not saying it doesn't take effort. It does take effort to do that, but in the development sense, that needs to be conscious effort. And I also believe intrinsically motivated effort, but we all can do it. And that is great news.
It's a muscle, after all, a sort of muscle.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the areas that we work in our business, and one of the terms that we use is brain dominance, neurological dominance, which is really about preference. So as you say, looking at the metaphor of a muscle, if you're developing preference for using your brain in a particular way, you're going to strengthen it. And if you strengthen it, you're more likely to revisit it. Because it's stronger, you're more likely to access that neural pathway in order to make a decision, reach conclusion. When your brain is filled and stimulated by millions of bits of information in any moment, you're far more likely to go to that stronger muscle. You know, just as if you were asked to catch a ball, you would probably, without even thinking about it, you would put out your dominant hand to catch the ball. If you're standing outside of the metro in Rome at night or in London at night and you think, oh, there's a bit of danger behind me, you wouldn't stand there thinking, now, which foot should I start to run with? You have a dominant muscle, you have a dominant foot, and it is the same in our brains. We have dominant preferred pathways that are exactly in your metaphor of a muscle. They're stronger, so we go there more often.
But as you said, they can be changed with...
They can be changed.
Like, going on a diet or decided to start, an exercise program. At the beginning, it's difficult.
Exactly. It takes effort. And, here we are in November, so we're approaching that wonderful time of year of New Year's resolutions where everybody sets their diet goals and their exercise goals. And we know there's some failure rates amongst that. But, with the people who are really successful at changing habits are those people that they want to develop that muscle, and they've most likely researched the methods by which they can flex that muscle and start to develop the muscle from a weak muscle up to something a bit stronger. And there's always a tipping point for people who change habits where it starts to get easier. They may not recognize this or tangibly say, yes, it's Wednesday, it's today, it's going to get easier. But people who are successful with weight loss, or who are successful with giving up smoking, for instance, there will be that point where, this is a bit easier. And it's partly easier because their brain is enabling them to make it easier. And they've made some great choices by building that brainy muscle to help them get there. So habit change is a great example of how we can strengthen our neural pathways.
You mentioned personality types.
Mm-hmm.
If you can, tell us more about that, and how important it is to be aware of your personality type in your life and business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really helpful for people to have a language around their natural personality, and by that their natural strengths, how they choose to operate, how they choose to think, the preferences that they have, but most importantly, how that manifests in terms of their behavior and how they show up in the world of others. So how they are demonstrating those preferences and their personality to others. So in our business, we have a tool. There are many tools on the market that measure this. We have a tool that's underpinned by neuroscience, and it's just the same as the other tools, but it's underpinned by really the way that the synaptic network operates. We know that when people answer certain questions, that it's activating certain parts of the brain. So the way that they answer those questions gives us an indication as to the strength and the preference they might have for that. So when you have a language for your strengths and the way that you show up from a human behavior perspective, that can be really helpful, both for your self-awareness, but I also think very importantly for your interpersonal awareness. So how you interrelate with other people, because the world is based on communication. The world we need social relationships to be able to survive and prosper. And if we're talking about the world of business and the world as we expand, it's based on social connections and relationships and learning. So where personality types really help people, I believe, is it helps them to understand that just because somebody is different than me, it doesn't make them wrong. So it enables us to step into the world of somebody else and see the world through their lens. That's hugely valuable, because what it can do is it enables you to put on, taking the metaphor of lens, it enables you to put on a different set of glasses so that you can see the world in a wider context. And when you broaden out the world that you're operating in, you're broadening out your possibilities, and anything is possible, so you're keeping an open mind, you're keeping the debate open. So often I think, and I'm sure you're experiencing the same, when I work with people in a large organizational setting, I often find that people tend to recruit their teams almost in the same guise as themselves, because we tend to be attracted to people who have similar preferences and neural pathways and personality types to ourselves. That's great. So you can have great collaboration operating within a team. But the potential downside of that, Paula, is the fact that if you think the same way, then you'll reach consensus really quickly. Yay, that's great for harmony and collaboration. But what are you missing? What you're missing the perspective of somebody with a different preference, a different way of operating, a different way of thinking. So I know they're more difficult to manage, but for a leader, I think sometimes, even if the project and the work that you're working on is of a particular style, it's useful sometimes to have a team of great diversity and richness. And if you've got that, it's harder to manage, but you have a wider range of thinking via those personality types.
And are there, standard, I know that then there are all the individual traits that, even if you more or less have a dominant personality type, you see different, behaviors and traits that correspond to this personality type. But are there, some standard macro personality types that you can tell us about?
Yes, absolutely there are. And I think, so point number one, and it's like a red flag, a bit of a warning for all of us. You use the word generalize. We have to generalize. The brain makes us all unique, like our retinas, like our fingerprint. We are absolutely unique beings. So even within what I'm about to describe to you, there are infinite differences and infinite different ways of interpreting that language. And language is a binary thing. We all interpret language in different ways. So by even describing them, I'm having to generalize. So in our model, and other models actually do agree with these as well, very, very broadly, we talk about 4 different ways of thinking. And again, within those, there are infinite ways of how that plays out and how people think. So if we look at the left-hand side of the brain, and interesting, there's been a lot of research since the 1950s about the difference between left and right sides of the brain, largely because before fMRI scanning technology came on, a lot of research was done by psychologists when they severed the wiring between the left and the right for epileptic patients. They did that to relieve their seizures, but it allowed psychologists to look at the different behaviour if somebody was just operating with the left or the right. That has evolved since the 1950s, but some of the thinking is still very, very true. It's evolved, not been refuted. I think that's important to say. But we do know upper left-hand side of the brain, this is where people apply their logical, rational thinking. So to give a larger picture around that, that would be where you are playing with analysis, you're enjoying facts, you're enjoying logic. It's about how do things stack up? Do they make sense? Now, still on the left-hand side of the brain, in the lower part of the left-hand side of the brain, this is where it's more about linear order and detail. So I tend to differentiate between this. The upper bit is more about the facts and the logic. People who operate just there may not be detailed. They may be operating to the 80-20 rule. People who operate down at the lower part of the brain, they really like that detail. They like working in a structured, ordered manner. A beginning, a middle, and an end really matters. They get really stressed by people who operate in a different way. So let's talk about those people. Popping opposite onto the upper right-hand side of the brain, those are the people who don't like detail. Those are the people probably like me and potentially like you. And I think we have this awareness, so we know that we've got to contain ourselves on our podcast. We're the people who we have a preference for the big picture thinking. So we have a holistic view. We're able to look into any situational scenario and really go with the flow on whatever is that bright, shiny new thing that's interesting to us. We're able to, what we enjoy doing is looking at variety. We enjoy spontaneity and adventure. And in fact, for us, we would find that detail, that beginning, middle, and end limiting. We would find it's more freeing for not to have that framework. So you can see how the difference is. And just finishing off, going on to the lower right-hand side of the brain, this is what we call the emotional brain, the feeling part of the brain. So if we oppose it with the rational, you could say the rational people are the thinkers, whereas the more emotional people are the feelers. So the difference there is that people who operate strongly from that part, the lower right-hand part of the brain, they'd step inside a situation and almost subconsciously they'd try it on for size, and they'd ask themselves, how's this going to affect me and how is it going to affect others? It's not always about harmony. It can be about passion and belief, but people they're very in touch with their senses and their emotions. If you oppose that with the upper left and the rational part, logical part of the brain, those people are stepping out of a situation. They're looking in, they're applying logic and rationale and analysis to, and looking in and thinking, okay, how can this situation be resolved? Whereas the emotional people are inside it. What we do know, so that's a very generalized model where you look at upper left, right, and lower left and right. What we do know that's quite interesting, and it loops right back to what you were saying at the beginning about the ability to flex. Neuroscientists know that we only really use in every waking moment around 50 to 60% of our brains. And that's to do with the effort that it takes to go into all of the brain. But I want to make a really important point. Everything I've said is about preference and dominance. It's not about ability. So I, for instance, am very right-brained. I really love the big picture, and I really love the harmony and the empathy piece and working with people. That's where I gain my energy from. It doesn't mean I can't do detail. I just don't like detail. Does that make sense? So when it comes to that horrible time of year when I've got to do my taxes, yeah, of course I can step into the detail. It feels harder work for me, and it takes more energy from me because it's not what I enjoy doing. Does that make sense? So yes, really a generalized personality type or it's a brain-based model to give people a language around their strengths and how they show up in the world.
So never put a person, like me and you, to do a very detailed task. That won't work.
But you know what, Paula? We could do it.
Of course.
We could do it, and then we'd have to go and lie down.
And we do it very often, but we just don't like it, and it really drains us.
Exactly, and I think it's as important for people to understand why certain things feel draining as it is for to understand why certain things feel motivating and energizing. It can help them plan their day, because we all have to do everything. Even I have to think of logical things sometimes. And it helps to plan the way that you operate day to day. And if you have to do tasks that aren't really fitting with your preferences, maybe do them when you're at a more energetic time of day, when you're more buzzed up.
Yeah. And it is also very important to understand that, let's say the main way we operate, or the way that comes natural to us. Because of course, if I'm a very emotional person and I'm speaking with my opposite, a very rational person, if I use language such as I feel, this person probably won't understand me, and there will be a barrier in our communication.
Precisely so. And in our business, well, we have a practitioner network. We train people to use this. And what you've just described is really the main application of how this is useful for people in understanding when they're operating with others, that if they can try to use language that lands more effectively in the world of the listener, because that's communication. It's how it's interpreted in the person that you're communicating with. And if you can understand that they may operate and have a different language set that is meaningful for them, that's deeply useful. Advertisers and marketeers have been doing this for years. They just now have the substantive technology and research to sit behind it. Car manufacturers would think about who are the type of buyers for a BMW, or a buyer for a Fiat, or a Volkswagen Beetle. They're different markets, so they use different language. And an advert for a Volkswagen Beetle will be different from a Range Rover. It will be, because it's appealing to different types of people, and this is giving some really good substance that sits behind that.
And not only, for example, my audience is mainly small business owners and professionals.
Yeah.
So when you are aware of the things that drain you, to go back to the example that we were making before, and I know I can do it, but it drains me. It takes me a lot of time because it's not something that comes natural to me. So maybe this is something that I can outsource.
Oh, exactly so. It's about really understanding what would be beneficial to you in your business. And it's hard for people who are starting and perhaps they don't have much money or investment and they're thinking, I don't need a VA, for instance. But just think about your cost per hour and what it will release you to do. It would release you to be in your flow, creating the service for the customers that you're operating with. And I think it is really, really deeply helpful. So for me, one of the things when I came out on my own 15 years ago, I now do have a business partner, I knew that a major derailer for me would be lack of team. So as a trainer and a coach and a facilitator, I formed associate relationships with other training companies so I could get my sense of community from there. I didn't do all my work through that, but I did a few bits and bobs of work where I co-facilitated. So I built partnerships in that sense of community, and it mattered because I knew that without that, I would feel drained and I wouldn't feel as motivated to be in my flow when I was working on my own. And I think that really matters. I think that's a great application. Yeah.
Absolutely. Gill, I know you wrote a book.
Yay!
Can you tell us something about this book?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wrote a book. It was published in July, and it's called Stuck: Brain Smart Insights for Coaches. So what I wanted to do was to be able to share with fellow coaches and actually anybody involved in the field of personal and development of others, anybody interested in that area of development. I wanted to share with them some personal stories of clients that I'd worked with. So they came to me with various challenging presenting issues and how I used neuroscience in the conversation, nothing deeply research based in terms of the conversation, but how I lifted that research based into accessible language to really help people broaden the scope of their thinking and to unlock their challenges and to create solutions for themselves. So it was all about trying to share with coaches the fact that adding neuroscience into their armory can be helpful. It's not at all about changing the way they work, because as coaches we've been serving our clients beautifully for years, but just about adding this wave of thinking and the new underpinning of neuroscience into their world of work, how it can really help. Because I think, Paula, it's worth putting this on the table. Neuroscience is topical. And there's a lot of what I call fake news, a lot of neuro nonsense out there. There really is, where magazines will take one little piece of research and they'll distort it and come out with this magical neuro diet or neuro horoscope, or you know what I mean. There's even now a branch of law called neuro law, and interestingly we will be hearing more about this as the evidence gets larger. But at the last reading I learned that there were about 2,500 pieces of documented cases in the legal world in America where defense lawyers have managed to delay or maybe delay some decisions, or maybe defend their client by using neuroscience, by saying, well, it wasn't them, it was their brain. It wasn't their intention, it was something. It's so interesting. So some of that is valid, but some of it isn't. And
yes,
very interesting. So, does this mean that mass murderers and psychopaths are always going to get away with it? So, I think there's a lot of neuro nonsense around. So part of the purpose of the book and part of the work that myself and my business partner want to do, we want to bridge the gap between neuro nonsense and the really challenging, weighty, academic, wonderful work and translate that into accessible language. So in my book, through stories of clients who came to me, I wanted to bring that to life. So there's a chapter on somebody who lost their motivation, a gentleman who was suffering from loneliness at work. I mean, it's a real challenge to our health, actually, loneliness. People who get caught in a negative spiral, stress, decision fatigue, and various other presenting topics that you as a coach and me as a coach, people come to us with these areas. And I wanted to talk about what we did, what worked, what didn't work, and the sort of brain basis of that.
Amazing.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to, seeing your book.
Good. Thank you. Yeah.
Really, really. Gill, you are going to be one of the amazing speakers at the conference in London on the 31st of January, Women Who Dare to Desire. I won't ask you about what you will be talking about, and there's one reason why. You have to come to the conference to know it.
Exactly. Please, listeners, come to the conference. Amazing speakers.
Yes. And so I'm really looking forward to listening to your story there.
Thank you.
For our listeners, if you already are in London, please do come to the conference. I'm sure you're going to be inspired, motivated, and not only you will be able to network with not only the amazing speakers who will be there, but also, the people who will attend the conference. So it will be a great opportunity for us to meet. And if you're not in London, it can be a nice excuse to maybe take a flight.
Yes, and I'm sure the January sales will still be on. And so please, extra reason.
This is an extra reason, absolutely. So, Gill, can you tell us also, our audience, where they can know more about you? I will be publishing all the links to your website, etc. But if you can, also tell them now.
Absolutely. So our website, which will be in the link, thank you so much, is www.mybrain.co.uk. We have lots of articles and material on there. But more importantly, I'd really love to invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn. I have developed the muscle, the neural pathway for posting every single day, apart from Saturday and Sunday. Yeah. So my posts in the week I have 4 posts and 1 article. I try to do the article on Wednesday. It just depends when. But please comment. Please join that conversation about the benefits of understanding neuroscience. And we can talk and have conversations on LinkedIn. It's a great community.
Amazing. Yes, I love LinkedIn too. And fantastic that you developed your muscle to be present there every day except weekends.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So I will be publishing all your links, also a link to the book.
Thank you.
And in the show notes, there will also be a link to the Women Who Dare to Desire conference, so you can know more about the conference and, of course, buy your ticket.
Yes, please do, everyone.
Yes, and I know there's a special offer coming for Black Friday, but I think that probably Black Friday will be already passed by the time I publish this episode, unfortunately, so we won't say anything anyway about it. Okay, Gill, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to meeting you.
Me too.
January.
Thank you.
And I will be staying in London for a while, so maybe, we can also have a chat relaxed after the conference.
That would be amazing, Paola. Thank you for inviting me and so warmly welcoming me to talk about my passion, the brain.
Yeah, thank you. And get ready for another episode, because, of course, I want to know more and more and share your knowledge with our listeners.
That would be really exciting. Thank you very much.
Oh my God, how much I love this topic. I'm really fascinated by, the way we operate and why we are who we are, and also about the fact that really, if we want to change, if we are really motivated to change, we can do that. Yes, it takes work. It's not something that happens overnight. But when we understand why we are operating in a certain way, and we see that this way of behaving, of operating, is not taking us where we want to go, is not helping us to be who we want to be, is not, supporting us in achieving what we want to achieve in life, it doesn't take much to change. I mean, it's just a question of shifting the way we think, and it's a question of, exercising this new way of thinking every day, slowly, step after step, and this will certainly help us achieve what we want to achieve. If you have been following me for a while, you know that I really strongly, deeply believe that the sky's the limit, that we can achieve everything we want to achieve at any age. And that prosperity, and you know that I believe that prosperity is not just money. Prosperity is really having the life you want, the quality of life you want, doing the things you're passionate about, having around you the people that really empower you, feeling fulfilled in whatever you do, having the possibility to do what you love to do. So prosperity is something that we can build every day, making the necessary changes when we understand that, you know, a belief that we have is conditioning the way that we behave, is conditioning and affecting the action and the choices we make. We have all the tools and the possibility to make the necessary changes and really achieve the dream that we want to achieve and be the person that we want to be. So I hope this episode really inspired you, and I would have, you know, gone on and on and on and on talking with Gill because I'm really fascinated, and as I said, I'm going to interview her again in another episode very soon, and maybe we will focus on a more specific topic. And by the way, if you want us to cover a specific topic and see how neuroscience can help us in that area, please let me know. Leave a comment on my website, leave a review on Apple Podcast or on a Spreaker, or leave a comment on the social media where I'm, you know, sharing this episode with you all, and let us know, and we will be happy to cover the topic that you are most interested in. So I would like to remind you once again that on January the 31st, I will be one of the speakers at the Women Who Dare to Desire conference. If you are in London, please come. If you are not in London, as I have often said in my podcast episodes, that this can be an opportunity maybe to spend the weekend in this wonderful city. The 31st is a Friday, so you can spend a whole weekend in London and join us and be inspired not only by the speakers but by all the other amazing, I'm using this word again, by all the amazing women that will attend this meeting. By the way, tickets are still available. There is a link in the show notes of this episode, and in the show notes you will find all the links to get to know more about Gill, her amazing work, her book. So just visit my website, and you will find all the links, and you have the possibility to leave your comment. You know, your feedback, your opinion is very important to me and to my guests in this show. So I wish you a wonderful weekend, since this episode is going to be live on Friday. So have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you next week with 2 more episodes of the Prosperity on Air podcast. Bye for now.